So, I mean, I share some of your same concerns, and I think that's been the kind of running question after really since the first trade rumors came out about Harden
Mm-hmm.
wanting to go to Brooklyn was there's only one ball. These guys are all super, super elite scorers. Like, there's no concern about, like, are they going to have the 25th ranked offense? If they figure this thing out, they're going to have a top five, if not the league's best offense.
Agreed.
But yeah, how do you see it working with all three of them once all three are back in the lineup, whenever that may be?
Right. Presuming that Kyrie hasn't retired, yes, I would absolutely say that they need to figure out that dynamic right there with Harden and Kyrie. I think that's the worst one, because as we've seen with Kevin Durant, he is very able to play off the ball a lot.
Mm-hmm.
I think he actually has the capability of being a guy who understands what he can do without having the ball in his hands all the time. So I don't think he's as big of an issue. Like, yes, sometimes he will have to have possessions and where he handles the ball and creates something off his own. Yes, absolutely. But he doesn't need to the same extent as someone like Harden. So you can sort of slide him a little bit off the ball. Kyrie, though. Kyrie loves the 20 seconds, let me herky jerky dribble around five guys and end with a reverse layup possessions. He loves those. So does Harden, with the different outcome of him stepping back from three. So it comes down to how do those two guys get along in terms of touches and
Mm-hmm.
on ball presence, and how many times are they going to be able to share the court without some sort of overlap where one of them is standing still. And it really comes down to Steve. I think Steve Nash is in a tough spot. This is, after all, a rookie coach. I
Yeah.
understand his pedigree as a player, but he's a rookie coach. Never coached before, and now he's going to be juggling three tremendous egos and three tremendously talented players, which, that's obviously the most important thing here. But can he get them on the same page in terms of sharing the basketball? Can he get them on the same page, especially with James Harden, and go, sometimes, man, you just need to be an active player, when others have the rock, to space the court. Like, that was one of the issues that Chris Paul had back in the day in Houston. That was, you're not putting yourself in a position to help us. Like, you're a great 3-point shooter, high volume 3-point shooter, but when I have the ball and I'm trying to create something, you're just standing there with hands on your hip and not doing jack. Like, Harden has to change his body language. He has to change his engagement. He has to change the way he, attacks the game when he doesn't have the ball in his hands. I think that's very fair to say. And unless he does that, this could get really ugly.
Mm-hmm.
But on the flip side, if he does come into Brooklyn and he just goes, you know what, I'm all about team right now, great. Great. Every concern goes out of the book.
Right. I mean, we've seen him work with Chris Paul in recent years and Russell Westbrook last year, so he has played along ball dominant point guards in the past 2 or 3 years.
Right.
But yeah, he hasn't had a ball dominant point guard and a Kevin Durant on his team. So I think it's fair to be not concerned necessarily, but at least curious to see how all of that fits. I mean, the good thing for the Nets is that they do have Mike D'Antoni on their coaching staff, who
Yeah.
has plenty of experience with James Harden, and I think the Nets must be thanking their lucky stars right now that they have Mike D'Antoni with his experience, especially for first-time head coach Steve Nash. So that should help. I think the other question really coming into the season for the Nets was about their defense. And now that they've traded Jared Allen, who was their best rim protector by far, I think that's even more of a question because, a starting backcourt of Kyrie Irving and James Harden looks like barbecue chicken to most.
Oh, I have thoughts.
Okay,
I
yeah.
have takes on this.
Give me.
Because,
Give me.
yeah, look, one thing is the offense. We can talk about like the three-headed dynamo of Harden, Irving, and Durant as much as you want. But when I saw, the fact that Jared Allen was moved out, which, we all anticipated this.
Right.
The first thing that came to mind was, oh my God, they're going to ask more of KD right now. They are going to ask of him to become the defender that he was in Golden State now.
Mm-hmm.
They're going to ask him to be more of a rim protector. They're going to ask him to switch on to bigger players. And you know what? I wouldn't push my luck. This is still a guy who came off one of the most horrendous injuries that you can have as a professional athlete, especially in basketball. I understand he's played tremendously, but let's not add to his burden. I don't think that's the play, right? I mean, could you just imagine if you ended up in a situation where you just gave him too much responsibility and his body crumbled as a result of it? That would be catastrophic.
Yeah, and I mean, he is probably the best defender on the team now. I mean,
there's no probably about it.
And
who else?
You're gonna put him in a position like, here's what I keep coming back to, and we can talk about the price here as well. I think this does increase their odds of winning a championship in the next 2 years. Like, if everything breaks right, just having those three guys, 2 MVP candidates and an all-star, like, it raises their ceiling. And I would argue it raises their floor too, because as you referenced, we don't know what's up with Kyrie right now. He's been out because of personal reasons for more than a week. It's unclear when he's coming back. There was the video circulating of him maskless at a family member's birthday party that the NBA is investigating. It sounds like he's not going to be back this week at least, because the NBA is seeing whether he violated COVID protocols. I don't want to speculate about what's going on with him, when he's going to be back, whatever. In the meantime, bringing in James Harden at least, doesn't force Kevin Durant to play 38 minutes a night, which is good.
Right.
But when I look at a hypothetical matchup against the Milwaukee Bucks in the Eastern Conference Finals, or against the Lakers in the NBA Finals, let's take the Bucks. Like, the Bucks have 3 elite defenders I mean, more than that, because Brook Lopez, I think you can also include, but 3 guys who match up pretty well. Giannis, Chris Middleton, Drew Holiday. You could put those 3 guys in some combination on KD, Harden, Kyrie. Yep. I don't think the same is true inverse. I don't think, KD is going to be on Giannis, and then, like, Harden or Kyrie is going to be on Drew. And so, like, who's guarding Middleton now that Taurean Prince is gone, Karis LeVert's gone? Yep. I don't have a good answer. And then, look at the Lakers in the finals. All right, cool. We've got LeBron and AD. I guess KD could go on LeBron. He's done it in past finals. But who on this team is guarding Anthony Davis?
Yeah, no one. You have to put KD on AD.
And then who's guarding LeBron? James Harden?
Yeah, probably. Which is
boy.
like no. I'm saying there's no right answer here because it's all wrong.
Right. And I don't want to jump to conclusions here, because I don't know that the Nets are necessarily a finished product. I think they'll rely on the buyout market for sure. But they traded so much draft equity in particular. They traded 3 first-round picks, 4 first-round swaps, so they cannot trade a pick after once this upcoming draft happens. They could trade the 2028 pick, but like between now and the start of the new league year, they are not allowed to trade a first round pick of any sort. They have Landry Shamet, I guess, is their one remaining trade chip. Like, Spencer Dinwiddie has next to 0 value now that he's out for most of the, if not all of the year. I mean, Timothy Luau-Cabarrot, Bruce Brown, maybe. Like, they just don't have a ton of guys who they can dangle if they're trying to upgrade. If they realize, we're relying on DeAndre Jordan as our primary center, or we don't have a guy to guard AD. How do we fix this? I don't know that they have a good way to do so.
I would agree. And in terms of the draft picks, I think it was an overpay.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I'm at too. Here's, I guess, my fundamental question with this is, given the downside, the potential downside of this, like, all 3 of these guys are only signed through 2022. They all have player options after that. Do they have to win at least one title in the next 2 years to justify this cost?
See, I don't think we can look at it that way. I mean, from the Nets perspective, yes.
Yeah.
But here's the thing, and this is what bothers me that no one is really talking about. Look at the personalities of the 3 people that they have on the roster. Kyrie Irving is entirely unpredictable.
Right.
If he he moves like the wind changes. So if he sticks around, until 2022, like unless he wants to trade or something, he could easily leave that year. Like he told the Celtics crowd, during the opener a couple years back, I'm gonna resign. No, he sure as hell didn't. He can leave, and that can change on a whim. KD as well is not one of those guys who is super calculated necessarily. I don't mean that as a negative thing, but he's not. He can also get offended or annoyed. Like, apparently Draymond Green's presence was enough to push him out of Golden State.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so again, if those three guys don't click, KD could be like, you know what, F this, I'm out.
Right.
And then James Harden is James Harden, right? If those two guys leave, he's going to be looking at it and go, oh, this is Houston 2.0. I don't want to be here. Bye. Yeah, I would say if you sacrifice all that, first round capital, absolutely, you're in a win now situation right now. I'm putting all the pressure on Brooklyn. Usually, I would like to give teams some run and like say, no, you know what, it's not a win now necessarily. Mm-hmm. But look, when a team gives up that much, like last year's Clippers, remember when Paul George was like, no, it's not a win now.
Right.
Like, bull. Like, I understand where he came from, and I understand that they had another year, particularly this year, to kind of rectify what happened. But no, last year was absolutely a win now. Mm-hmm. Look at what the Clippers sacrificed to get him on board, him and in extension Kawhi. Yes, of course they have to win now. And now the Nets have virtually no other trace assets whatsoever. They need to win now. If they come up short in the playoffs this year, hellfire should rain upon them from the media perspective. Absolutely, it should.
Oh, it will. It definitely will.
And it should. And it should. I wouldn't complain whatsoever if Nets fans went out and said, this is not okay, and we're going to have a 4-month media criticism extravaganza because look at the players that you have. Look at what you relinquished. That means you're all in, and to a, in my opinion, perverse extent. Yeah. So I think this was an overpay. But look, again, Brian, you know what? I'm being naive. I'm being too negative as well because look. When has it ever gone wrong for Brooklyn when they traded a bunch of draft picks? When has it ever gone wrong?
Right. Well, I mean, at least these guys, like, all of them are still in their prime. This is not trading for a washed-up Paul Pierce and Kevin Garnett. But yeah, that is the downside. I mean, I think the phrase championship or bust gets thrown around a little too often because it's like, well, what does the bust mean? For Brooklyn, the bust means these guys either walk away or, like, again, who knows what's up with Kyrie? Like, maybe he just walks away from basketball in general. One of them gets hurt and they just don't have the depth to make up for that loss. And then, like, okay, they gave up a 2021 first-round swap that, barring an absolute catastrophe, is not coming into play. So, right. That you can almost take that off the table. Again, an unprotected 2022 first rounder, barring a catastrophe, probably going to be in the 20s, somewhere in the 20s. But
maybe again, anything can happen over the course of a year and a half.
Right, but then I mean, they gave up unprotected 2024 and 2026, and then Houston has the right to swap 23, 25, 27. Get to the middle of this decade, and it's going to be really interesting to reflect back on this trade. Because, yeah, I mean, that's the downside more. The downside is they're the Nets of the mid-2010s again, and they are just so hopelessly lost that it's going to take a decade for them to dig their way out.
Right. That's, you know what, this might be a little bit hot takey, but I think the most dangerous thing they relinquished here are the swaps. Well, it could have the most dramatic effects. It really could. Simply because in 2023, 2025, and 2027, if the Nets just suck at that point, the Rockets are going to go, thank you very much for the number 5 overall pick. Thank you very much for the number 2 overall pick. Hey, thank you very much for the number 1 overall pick. And they are going to be put back in the line, and they have to do what Sean Marks did initially was, let's figure out a way to get assets and get back on this train by just waiting it out. Like, God, it just has this uneasy feeling when I look at the pick swaps. It really is not great. They would have to hit on, the picks that they then keep if they're bad, which could be really late picks.
Right.
And they would have to just make the most of those. So they are going to have first rounders, but it's an uphill battle of hitting right on those.